Shad has always been an interesting rapper with the way he approaches his conscious rap, with a focus on incredibly thematic sonic atmospheres that give his lyrics and flows an added layer to them. On this new album, the varied production is sharp and the songwriting ideas are pretty creative. His clever and witty flows are as charismatic as ever, and he's still able to make some pretty poignant points as well. The opening track, Out of Touch, is a nice blend of neo soul and pop rap. Work has a killer industrial beat with how punchy the timbre of the drums are. Storm is an interesting progressive rap track with a lot of phases instrumentally to make it feel like a grand piece. Not every track impresses though, a handful of them have some really lukewarm beats, and while lyrically the conscious topics and politics are engaging, the album starts to oversaturate itself with how it structures these songs, especially in the latter half. The ubiquity of the clever wittiness doesn't always vibe well with what the songs individually are trying to say. But regardless, this is a really good album. I recommend it. This is my first time ever listening to Catherine Moan, and that sounds really weird when I say it like that. I did thoroughly enjoy this album, however. This is some of the most blissful and fluid electropop / dream pop albums I've heard all year. Each song has a beautifully distinct soundscape, and the rhythms and bleeding synths and melodies just synchronize into some pretty elated experiences, with tracks like The Ordinary, Faces, and especially Skin Graft. A couple of songs here didn't do it for me. I found Lucky Lobotomy to have a somewhat prickling melody that I didn't like. The vocal mixing can sound a bit amateurish too at times, and sometimes it is quite noticeable, but for the most part, I thought this album was great. I didn't go into this expecting any of the material to be close to the band's golden days. I was more curious to see how the band would sound in the modern day. They aren't as antiquated as I thought they would be, and I kind of feel like they're more of a trip to the past than anything else. But some of the songwriting results in songs looping in circles despite being a progressive rock album. It's over an hour long, including the bonus tracks, so it is quite bloated as well. Songs like Western Edge and Future Memories are very run-of-the-mill, pretty forgettable. But I'd be lying if I say I didn't come away with this album with, a handful of tracks I liked. The Ice Bridge was a nice adventure to go on. Leave Well Alone has a nice progression, going from folksy beginnings to a forced send-off. And Sister Sleeping Soul is a fantastic song. I love the grieving sentiment and melodic embellishments. So yeah, it's nowhere near close to their best work by any stretch, and it can be quite boring at times, but it had a handful of moments that were memorable. To me anyway. Yeah, it's I thought it was decent. This is their second and reportedly last collaboration together. I've always found the prospect of these collaborations to be interesting. Two highly talented vocalists singing over vintage jazz instrumentals akin to the sounds of the 60s and 70s. But their first collab album ran into the issue of near every song exhibiting identical structures and payoffs to the point where it felt overly predictable, and I feel the exact same way about this one. Yeah, it's pretty and wintry and cozy and well performed, but the pastiche loses its luster for me pretty early on, making the rest of the album pretty indistinct. By the time I hit the third track, I already know what I'm in for. Yeah, it's okay. This is a pretty tongue-in-cheek, straightforward power pop and indie rock album with some really cool moments of angst and vulnerability. The performances are filled with raucous energy, and a lot of the songs are really memorable due to how punchy they are and how wild the lyrics can be at times. The track listing does do itself in with how the ideas are constrained by the one-note instrumental palette, exhibiting some pretty indistinct tracks, mostly on the slower singer-songwriter side of things. But this is a great album nonetheless. Highly recommend. I've always been enamored with this artist's take on future funk. A lot of the genre tends to be very safe, utilizing near identical methods of sampling and production, no matter who is behind it, with the conventional drum patterns and streaking uses of samples and electronics. And while there is some of that here, the cuts that venture into different directions do truly stand out. Like the uplifting sunburnt chord mania on It'll Be Alright, the use of 8-bit and chipmunk on Relax a Little, the highly danceable Be Strong, and the potent jazzy send-off of Sayonara. These songs are able to express a different variation of the same emotion to a pretty impressive degree. While it does have a couple dime a dozen future funk tracks, Just Have Fun is a really fun time. Wiki is back with his best album in a while. His pen game here is super high quality as he tones down his eccentricism to be more candid and introspective. Every feature is fantastic. I love the murky East Coast hip-hop beats, and the stories Wiki tells range from being highly personal to highly critical to highly emotional. Front to back, this album is really strong in a lot of areas. The city of New York is essentially the main character throughout the album, as Wiki describes so many different aspects about its influence and impact, and I never lost interest hearing about it. The beats, lyrics, and flows are just top notch. This is one of my favorite albums of the year. Give it a listen. It's not going to be for everyone, but I do think it's worth hearing. I tried my best to get into this album, I really did, but its amorphous and hyper minimalist offerings acted like repellents to me. It's a very skeletal album in every possible regard, from the production to the vocals to the songwriting. Nothing about this stood out to me. I was bored out of my mind trying to get through this. Not that anything here is poorly done. The technical aspects are sound, like the mixing and audio fidelity, and there is some interesting texture work for sure, but it's not my thing. This is officially a remix album of her debut record, but it does not sound like that whatsoever. After hearing it, it's like a rebirth where every track is reimagined in much more explorative ways. Like, this is an incredibly liminal experience with weird vocal manipulations, incredibly detailed atmospherics across the board, and compositions that are so well paced and developed as they reach their crescendoing climaxes, pushing these sounds of IDM, tech house, and neoclassical music to a whole other level. Hearing over an hour of it can induce a fair amount of deja vu, and some of these arrangements cut a bit too close in vein of similarity to other tracks, especially for a remix album, but it's unlike anything I've heard this year. It's truly a fascinating listen. Friends That Break Your Heart is yet another banger of an album from James Blake. I loved his last album, which was very focused on the joys of love and the rewarding journeys it takes you on, whereas this album is very reflective of the hardships of heartbreak and deterioration of love. There are so many good songs here with such beautiful production and gorgeous vocal work. Using labels like R&B and electronic won't do it justice. The sounds and atmospheres are so lovely and intricately made. The hooks and verses are some of the most potent I've heard this year. I still can't get songs like Life Is Not the Same and I'm Insecure out of my head because the songwriting and performances are just incredible. I've never even been in love, and yet these very personal moments gave me a unique sense of euphoria. It's an amazing album, one of my favorites of the year, hands down. You gotta listen to this. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know down below, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.